High stakes, inevitable consequences, cruelty and torture, honor and bravery. All this and much more is combined in Joe Abercrombie's Circle of the World. Throughout 10 books, this master of dark fantasy immerses us time after time into the world he created, where the severe warriors with their unique code of honor live in the north, and the south is inhabited by the dark-skinned religious fanatics, and in the center of the world, the greatest union ever created by humanity is located. This world is filled with magicians and witches, warriors, politicians, and even cannibals, possessing superhuman physical strength. So, welcome to the mythology and history of my favorite fantasy world, and today I wanna dive into Joe Abercrombie's Circle of the World. And of course, we will start with the beginning, the formation of the world. It is said long ago in ancient times, of which only rumors and legends have survived, the Circle of the World and the other side were united, and demons wandered around the world, wreaking havoc and tremendous damage. Demons bred from their union with people, and a huge number of their offspring who were half-breeds called devil bloods, half human and half demon, and they appeared throughout the world. Almighty Eos was one such devil blood. His demonic blood granted great gifts of magic. He rose up against the demons, banished them to the other side, and sealed the gates between the worlds. And thanks to this, humanity finally got the opportunity to develop and build its first civilization. But by sealing the gates, Eos still couldn't prevent the appearance of shards of the other side in the Circle of the World. Those shards were endowed with the most powerful magical energy of the demons, and the largest one was called the Seed. Eos, realizing that the traces of demons' presence and their power would remain in the world for a long time, established two main laws for his disciples. The first law claims that it is forbidden to touch the other side directly, forbidden to communicate with the world below, forbidden to summon demons, forbidden to open gates to hell. And the second law declares it is forbidden to eat the flesh of man. Eos had 4 sons, and 3 of them, the eldest ones, he gifted with the 3 pure disciplines of magic. The eldest of sons, Juvens, inherited the so-called high art, that is traditional magic. Canedias learned the art of making, the magical ability to give shape to stones and metals. Bedesh, the third son, gained the art of spirit talking, which allowed him to communicate with spirits and bend them to his will. Thus, 3 branches of magic appeared, which were called pure. The youngest son of Eos, Glasto, received nothing but his father's blessing. Almighty Eos ordered his sons to put the world in order, follow his 2 laws, and then left the world forever. After the disappearance of Eos, his children became the most powerful creatures of this world, and each of them chose their own path. Juvens found people living by the river Aos and gave them laws and learning, government, and the power to defeat their enemies. This is how the first cradle of civilization was created, the Old Empire, the success and development of which Juvens tirelessly guided. Canedias, who had the gift of shaping stones and metals, built the house of the Maker and made his home there. The people living in the area became his disciples and worshipped him like a god. Bedesh found solitude and devoted himself to communicating with spirits. And Glasto, who did not receive the gift of magic from his father Eos, begged his brothers to share their gifts with him, but received only a refusal. Now we have to fast forward a couple of centuries. In the Old Empire, Juvens decided to recruit students to teach them the principles of the high art, and takes a young guy named Bias as his first apprentice, who quickly learned the intricacies of magic and showed great potential in controlling fire. His second apprentice is an equally talented guy named Khalul, but over the years the rivalry between the 2 students is growing more and more, and hasn't been smoothed over even by the appearances of new students of Juven's, which will play a great role in the future. Juven settled in the Old Empire and often went on travels, during which he created two great libraries, one in the north and one in the west. We assume the possibility of the existence of both southern and eastern libraries, but there is no official confirmation of this yet. Thus, millennia passed, and during this time, Eos's youngest son Glasto became more and more envious of Juven's success and his empire, which finally pushed him to break the first law of his father and contact the other side. The creatures that inhabited the other side told Glasto where to find the seed and advised him to gather the army of demons. But he had no intention of stopping, subsequently breaking the second law by tasting human flesh, which gave him the physical strength peculiar to eaters. Auclus, the beautiful capital of Old Empire with majestic decorations and beautiful gardens, fell under the onslaught of Glasto and his army of demons. Taking advantage of yet another temporary absence of Juven's in the Old Empire, Glasto attacked Auclus and sat on the throne. Juven's, who found out about the attack, asked for help from his brother Bedesh, and together they managed to besiege Auclus and encircle Glasto's army. The last thing Glasto could do was try to open the gate to the other side with the help of the seed, but he made a mistake in pronouncing the spell, which led to a powerful shockwave released by the ancient relic, forever turning the once beautiful city into a dead desert, and Glasto himself was sent into oblivion. It's worth mentioning that Juven's brother Canedius refused to help him, as he was too gripped by his inventions. Realizing the full power of this relic, Juven gives the seed to Canedius for protection and study, despite the brother's refusal to help against Glasto, in the hope that he will put it to a good use. But years later, due to the loss of trust between Juven and Canedius, the elder brother changes his mind and first asks, then threatens Canedius to give back the seed. Finally, Canedius gives up, and all three brothers travel to the desolate island Shabulian, where they give the seed for safekeeping to the spirit of this island. Shortly after this, Juven finally decides to end the feud between his two most talented students, Bayas and Khalul, and sends them to opposite end of the world. Bayas to the Great Northern Library and Khalul to the south, quite possibly to the Great Southern Library that we have mentioned earlier. Bayas treated his mentor's decision as an exile and, suffering from anger, began searching for a new teacher. He approached Juven's brother Canedius, who happily agreed to accept him, realizing that he could use Bayas's talent for his own purposes, giving him only the smallest part of his knowledge just so that the young guy could serve him better. One day, when Canedius left the house of the maker for a while in search of materials for his inventions, Bayas decided to explore his abode and discovered Canedius' main secret, his daughter, Ptolemy. It is not difficult to guess that they fell in love with each other, and Ptolemy told Bayas about Canedius' experiments, during which he combined materials from the other side with his inventions. But Canedius caught Bayas and Ptolemy together and lost his temper. As a result, Bayas had to flee, fearing for his life. The only place he could run was back to Juven's, to whom he reveals Canedius' secrets. When Canedius comes to his elder brother and demands justice for the violation of his daughter, Juven tries to protect Bayas, and the two brothers start to fight, which results in Juven's death. Of course, the death of one of the greatest magicians could not be ignored, and Bayas gathers all the students of Juven's in order to avenge their teacher's death, all except one, Khalul, who never overcame his hostile feelings towards Bayas, blamed him for the death of the teacher, and refused to join the vendetta. Setting out to avenge their teacher's death, Bayas and his allies discovered that Canedius had not been idle, and for the war against Juven and his followers he created the Shanka, bestial and wild humanoids only capable of killing and breeding. After many significant battles, 11 magicians besieged the house of the maker, but could not get inside, and Bayas had to turn on his charm. He convinced his lover Ptolemy to betray her father and open the door for them. The battle with Canedius ended in death of two Juven students and defeat of the rest, but Bayas managed to corner Canedius high in the house, and both Canedius and Ptolemy fell to their deaths in their final combat. Where Bedesh was all this time is also unknown. but it is known that somewhere during this time he takes his last breath. Thus, the old time ended with the death of all four sons of Eos, and it was replaced by early history, and the beginning of the calculation of years, the starting point of which was the founding of the Union. After the death of all four sons of Eos, students of Juvens who survived the battle became the most powerful beings in this world. Bayaz, who specialized in fire spells, approached Harod, the ruler of one of Midderland's many petty kingdoms, and offered to advise him. Helping Harod, Bayaz united the Midderland's kingdoms into one state and proclaimed Harod the first High King of the Union. In parallel with these events, Khalul settled in Gurkul, where he headed the Gurkish, but did this not with the help of money like Bayaz, but with the help of faith. He introduced himself to the Gurkish as a prophet sent by the one God and began to recruit apprentices, the first of whom was Mamun. Together with him, Khalul tasted human flesh, and they became the first eaters after Gastrod. Formerly, the power of Gurkul belonged to the emperor ruling in the city of Shafa, and the prophet was considered only his advisor and mentor. But in fact, Khalul and his priest controlled all public life. Over the course of several centuries, Bayaz, by manipulating the monarchs, continued to develop his beloved Union. In 375 AU, King Casimir undertook a conquest of Angland, but later failed to conquer the north because of Skarling Hoodless. Afterwards, Sarikland was brought into the Union, and the wealthy port of Westport in Styria joined through the zeal of the Guild of Mercers. But not everything was so smooth through the history of the Union. For example, King Morlik the Mad provoked a civil war that almost tore the Union apart until the entire closed council recognized King Arnauld as the new monarch. Speaking of the councils, Bayaz created a state structure in which, although the High King is technically possessed with vast powers, in reality the Union was governed largely by the closed council, which consisted of the most influential nobles, commanders of the fleet and army, High Justice and Arch-Lector of the Inquisition. The vast power of the High King and the closed council is theoretically held in balance by the open council, a regular assembly of the realm's noblemen. We briefly mentioned Arch-Lector of the Inquisition, and if he exists, then there is an Inquisition, but in the Union it has nothing to do with religion. This organization combines police, detectives and spies, and serves only Arch-Lector and his interests. Khalul and his followers also did not sit still at their time, and the Gurkish Empire conquers more and more land, dominating almost the entire continent of Kanta. Khalul created the 100 Wards, a group of his disciples, each of whom was an eater. And so for almost 600 years, something similar to a Cold War has been taking place between Gurkul and the Union, or rather between Bayaz and Khalul. It is precisely the moment when the status quo between the two states is violated is considered the end of point of early history and the beginning of recent history, namely the last decade before the beginning of the first law cycle. In 566 AU, 9 years before the events of the Trilogy began, the First Gurkish War has erupted between the Gurkish Empire and the Union. The war went on with varying success. Both sides had victories during the war, but having captured the city of Ulriok, the Union considers victory to be on their side, despite the large number of defeats in other battles. In 568 AU, the autonomous city Dagoska, located on the border with the Gurkish Empire, joins the Union through the influence of the Guild of Spicers, and in 569 AU, an exchange of prisoners takes place between Gurkul and the Union, as a result of which a severely injured Colonel Sant Danglokta, who once showed great potential, returns home. Now let's move to the north, because shortly before the start of the events of the cycle, although the precise time of this event is unknown, the ambitious leader of one of the northern clans, named Betod, begins to unite the north under his banner, for the first time since the time of Skarling Hoodless. Well, the last thing that happens before the first book, The Blade itself, is the death of Lord Chancellor Ficht, in 575 AU, one of the member of the closed console. I really hope you enjoyed this video. While I was making it, I had two goals in mind. First of all, I wanted to be as entertaining as possible, not just informative. I wanted you to have fun while you're watching it. And the second goal can probably sound a little bit stupid for some of you, but I cannot help it. I really want one of my all-time favorite authors to know about my existence. So if this video will reach as many views as possible to hopefully one day get to the man himself, I'm gonna be a very happy tomato. But anyway, thank you so much for watching. You can like, subscribe, write something interesting in the comments. I enjoy reading your comments usually, you know, it's still internet. Anyway, that's way too much for closing words. See you on the next video, have a good one and bye!